It was supposed to be just another weekend evening, a night of laughter, music, and community. In the township of Bekkersdal, just west of Johannesburg, the tavern had always been a place for friends to gather after a long week, a place where stories were shared and memories were made. But that night, everything changed in a way no one could have imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the tavern lights glowed warmly against the cool night air, people from all walks of life made their way inside, unaware that in just a few hours their lives would be shattered forever. The Bekkersdal Tavern was more than a bar. It was a hub of social life. Families came with laughter, young adults chatted over music, and the familiar faces of neighbors brought a sense of comfort and belonging. Deep inside, no one was prepared for the violence that was about to descend upon them. What began as a routine night at a favorite local spot would soon become part of a tragic and unforgettable chapter in Bekkersdal's history. Around 1 o'clock in the early hours of that Sunday morning, unsuspecting patrons were laughing and ordering their drinks when chaos erupted. A group of around 12 heavily armed men pulled up in two vehicles, a white combi and a silver sedan, and stormed the tavern without any warning. What happened next was terrifying and swift. They opened fire indiscriminately at people, both inside and outside the establishment, bullets ripping through the laughter and plunging the night into terror. This was no targeted attack. It was a brutal, random assault on innocent people simply trying to enjoy a night out. SABC News families were torn apart in seconds. A group sitting near the back felt the first shots tear through the room, sending everyone into panic. Chairs fell, glasses shattered, and screams filled the air as people tried to flee. Some dove for cover behind tables while others ran for the doors, desperate for safety. Those who were closest to the exit pushed and shoved, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging through veins as they made instinctive attempts to escape the hail of bullets. Afrikaans, the scene was equally harrowing. Some patrons who managed to flee the innards of the tavern were struck while running down the street. Others were caught completely unaware as the gunmen continued firing randomly in the open, creating chaos in the once peaceful township night. Families watching their loved ones scatter were powerless to do anything but pray and scream. It was the kind of moment no one thinks could happen in their lives until it does. Al Jazeera among the crowd was a young e-hailing driver who had just dropped off a passenger and decided to grab a quick drink before heading home. In the blink of an eye, his life was cut short. He was struck in the crossfire, a stark reminder that violence does not discriminate and that even acts of kindness can end in tragedy. Mer News Agency, when the shooting finally stopped, the aftermath was a sight that defied imagination. Bodies lay motionless on the ground, while others who were wounded cried out in pain as friends and strangers alike tried to help. The night that began with joy had become one of fear, grief, and devastation. Emergency services were called, sirens wailed through the township, and residents gathered outside in shock, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. Police officers rushed to secure the scene, but the damage was already done. New Haven register as the shooting unfolded. Families who had been inside the tavern were frantically calling loved ones, trying to locate those who had managed to escape. Every unanswered phone, every silence was a moment of soul-crushing tension. For some, the relief of finally hearing a voice was overwhelming. For others, the unanswered rings became a haunting reminder of loss. Mothers searched for their children, fathers called out for their friends, and the community as a whole was plunged into a collective fear that would not leave them easily. Doctors and emergency staff who arrived on the scene were immediately overwhelmed by the number of injured. Some were rushed to hospitals with life-threatening wounds, while others were treated on the spot by first responders who did their best under impossible conditions. The sheer number of casualties, both dead and wounded, pushed medical facilities to their limits, and the calls for help echoed across hospital corridors. SABC News by morning, news began to spread beyond Bekkersdal. Reports emerged of 9 confirmed fatalities and more than 10 seriously injured. The death toll later rose to 10 as another victim succumbed to his injuries in hospital. Authorities confirmed the identities of two suspects involved in the shooting, but the full motive behind the massacre still remained unclear. The world was left with more questions than answers, and families were left with unimaginable grief and despair. Times LIV. In the wake of the tragedy, police launched a manhunt, mobilizing all available resources to track down the perpetrators. Crime scene investigators combed through evidence. Forensic teams worked tirelessly, and law enforcement appealed to the community for assistance. The sound of footsteps running through the streets of Bekkersdal, the flashing lights of police vehicles, and the constant radio chatter painted a picture of a community in pursuit of justice. Sunday Independent. Yet, even as investigations continued, another layer of controversy emerged. It was revealed that the tavern was operating with a fraudulent liquor license, a discovery that shocked residents and authorities alike. Police confirmed that the license presented as legitimate was in fact fake, and as a result, the tavern owner was arrested and charged with fraud. The alcohol stock was seized and the establishment shut down. For many, this revelation brought a mixture of outrage, confusion, and sadness. Diamond Field's advertiser, but nothing could undo the loss of human life. Parents stood at morning vigils, clutching photographs of loved ones. Friends gathered to share memories, tears streaming down their faces. Children asked questions that adults struggled to answer. Bekkersdal, a township where community had always been a source of pride, now had to grapple with fear and grief that would linger long after the tragedy itself. As the story of that night continues to unfold, what remains clear is that the Bekkersdal tragedy was more than just an act of violence. It was a moment that forever changed the lives of countless families, a moment that tested the strength of a community, exposed deep concerns about public safety, and forced a nation to reflect on the realities of violence in everyday life. And as the search for answers continues, the people of Bekkersdal, and indeed the world watching, are left with a profound question. How can communities heal when something so senseless, so devastating, tears through the very heart of their shared humanity? The day after the shooting, the Bekkersdal Tavern was silent, abandoned, and cordoned off with yellow police tape flapping gently in the breeze. The once vibrant township street now felt eerily empty, the echoes of that fateful night still haunting every corner. For the family at the center of this story, the nightmare was far from over. The Kumalo family, a close-knit household of 5, had been inside the tavern when the gunfire erupted. Their escape was nothing short of miraculous, but the trauma they endured would leave lasting marks on their hearts and minds. Mr. Kumalo, a strong, resourceful man in his late 40s, remembered the chaos vividly. He had instinctively shielded his youngest daughter, wrapping his arms around her while diving behind an overturned table. His wife, Namvula, clutched their eldest son tightly, praying they would survive the onslaught. The sound of bullets striking metal and shattering glass seemed endless. Time stretched unnaturally, each second heavy with fear and uncertainty. The family's survival was a delicate dance between instinct, quick thinking, and pure luck. As soon as the shooting subsided, the Kumalos sprang into action. Despite the pain in their limbs from diving and scrambling, they made a calculated dash toward the exit. Outside, the air was thick with smoke, the smell of gunpowder lingering, and the sound of sirens approaching. Neighbors had begun to gather, some helping the injured, others simply frozen in shock. Mr. Kumalo grabbed his daughter's hand and led his family down a narrow alley, keeping low and out of sight, ensuring they stayed together while navigating. The disoriented crowd, the trauma didn't end with their physical escape. Witnessing friends and strangers struck down, hearing screams and cries for help, and realizing how close they had come to death left an indelible psychological scar. Namvula found herself trembling uncontrollably, unable to process the sheer randomness of the violence. For her children, the memory of that night, the flashing lights, the deafening gunfire, the frantic scramble to survive, was the beginning of a series of sleepless nights and nightmares that would haunt them for months. Meanwhile, emergency personnel worked tirelessly, tending to the injured, transporting them to hospitals, and attempting to restore some semblance of order. The Kumalos were treated for minor cuts and bruises, but their emotional wounds were far more severe. The local hospital staff, recognizing the psychological toll, immediately arranged counseling services, a resource that would become crucial in the family's path toward healing. The Kumalos' experience was emblematic of a larger reality. Surviving the physical danger was only the first step in a long, arduous journey toward recovery. In the days following the shooting, the Kumalos found solace in each other, leaning on familial bonds to navigate grief, fear, and uncertainty. They shared stories of survival with other affected families, gradually building a network of support and understanding. Conversations that began as whispered recollections of the night evolved into discussions about safety, community accountability, and the importance of being vigilant in spaces that were once considered safe. These dialogues, while painful, laid the groundwork for collective resilience, empowering survivors to reclaim a sense of control over their lives. The township community rallied around those affected. Neighbors brought food, offered temporary shelter, and organized prayer vigils. Local leaders facilitated meetings with law enforcement, advocating for increased security and better emergency preparedness. The Kumalos, initially overwhelmed by their trauma, found themselves participating in these efforts, driven by the desire to prevent similar tragedies from happening to others. Their story became both a cautionary tale and a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable violence, communities could unite and support each other in recovery. While the external support was invaluable, the internal struggle remained profound. Each family member grappled with a different aspect of trauma. The eldest son, who had witnessed the death of a close friend, struggled with survivor's guilt. The youngest daughter, once playful and carefree, became fearful of loud noises, associating them with the shooting. Numvala experienced flashbacks that brought the terror of that night vividly back into her mind. And Mr. Kumalo, who had been the protector, felt a deep-seated anger and frustration at the senselessness of the violence. Therapy sessions became a critical component of their healing. Psychologists and counselors guided the family through exercises designed to process trauma, manage anxiety, and rebuild a sense of security. Over time, the family began to reclaim moments of normalcy, cooking together, attending school events, and even visiting public spaces that had once felt threatening. Each small victory reinforced their resilience and strengthened the bonds that had carried them through the most harrowing night of their lives, but the shadow of that night lingered in unexpected ways. News coverage, while helpful in raising awareness, sometimes re-traumatized survivors, with graphic images and eyewitness accounts replayed endlessly on television and social media. For the Kumalos, managing exposure to media became a delicate balancing act, staying informed about the investigation while protecting their emotional well-being. Community discussions about safety measures, crime prevention, and youth engagement helped channel collective grief into proactive strategies, ensuring that their story could inspire meaningful change rather than mere despair. Through it all, one lesson became increasingly clear. Survival was not only about escaping physical harm, but also about navigating the psychological aftermath. The Kumalos learned to identify triggers, communicate openly about fears, and support one another through moments of panic and anxiety. Their experience highlighted the importance of mental health resources, community solidarity, and proactive safety measures in the wake of violent events. It also underscored the courage required to face each day after trauma, proving that survival extends far beyond the initial escape. The family's journey was a testament to resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. From the terror of that fateful night to the slow, deliberate process of emotional recovery, the Kumalos exemplified the strength of human spirit when confronted with tragedy. Their story was not just about a single night of violence. It was about the enduring struggle to reclaim life, restore a sense of safety, and rebuild hope amid chaos. As the weeks passed, the family began to speak publicly, sharing their experiences in the media, at community forums, and through social networks, ensuring that the lessons learned would resonate far beyond Bekkersdal. And while the trauma of that night would never be completely erased, the Kumalos' journey illustrated a profound truth. Even in the darkest moments, survival, resilience, and the power of community could light a path forward, transforming tragedy into a source of strength, understanding, and hope. In the days that followed the Bekkersdal pub shooting, the township was still reeling. The Khumalo family, like many others, was caught between grief, fear, and a desperate need for answers. Law enforcement had begun its thorough investigation, but the initial chaos of the night made piecing together events incredibly challenging. Witness statements varied, some traumatized by the violence, others confused by what they had seen. Each account painted fragments of a night that seemed almost unreal, a chaotic, violent blur of sound, movement, and terror. Police cordoned off the area, collecting forensic evidence, analyzing bullet trajectories, and attempting to identify the perpetrators. Security cameras in the vicinity, previously overlooked, became vital in reconstructing the events. Investigators worked around the clock, trying to match vehicle descriptions, license plate numbers, and eyewitness reports. For the Khumalos, the police's presence was both a source of reassurance and a painful reminder of the magnitude of the tragedy. Every time an officer arrived with updates, it was a mixture of hope and dread, hope that justice would be served, dread that new details might bring more heartbreak. Meanwhile, the community began to mobilize in unprecedented ways. Residents formed neighborhood watch groups, coordinating patrols and communication networks to prevent similar attacks. Town meetings became more frequent, often filled with emotional testimonies from survivors and families affected by the shooting. Discussions included practical safety measures such as improved lighting, emergency evacuation routes, and rapid response protocols, as well as broader questions about crime, youth engagement, and the factors that had allowed such violence to occur in the first place. For the Khumalos, participation in these efforts was both empowering and emotionally taxing. Mr. Khumalo, still haunted by the images of that night, took on a leadership role in the neighborhood's new safety initiative, Namvala, driven by the need to protect their children, coordinated educational sessions for local youth, emphasizing conflict resolution, self-defense, and the importance of community vigilance. Their involvement was not only about personal healing, but also about transforming their pain into actionable steps that could prevent future tragedies. As the investigation progressed, shocking details emerged. Authorities confirmed that the perpetrators had meticulously planned the attack, targeting the tavern for reasons that were initially unclear. Motives ranged from organized crime disputes to attempts at intimidation within the township. The revelation that the tavern had been operating with a fraudulent liquor license further complicated the case, highlighting systemic issues of corruption, negligence, and accountability. For the Khumalos and the broader community, these revelations were a double-edged sword, anger and frustration at the perpetrators and the system, tempered by a cautious hope that exposing these truths could lead to justice and reform. The judicial process began to take shape, with arrests made and suspects brought to trial. For families like the Khumalos, court proceedings were a tense, emotionally charged experience. Each hearing reopened old wounds, forcing them to relive the horror, but it also offered the possibility of closure. Legal representatives worked tirelessly to ensure that victims' voices were heard, that the gravity of the crime was properly presented, and that accountability would not be ignored. The courtroom became a stage for both justice and catharsis, a place where pain and resilience coexisted. During this time, the media played a significant role in shaping public perception. News outlets and social media channels broadcasted stories about the shooting, survivor accounts, and police updates. The Khumalos faced a difficult balancing act, staying informed, advocating for justice, and protecting their privacy and emotional well-being. Interviews were carefully considered, shared cautiously, and often framed with the hope of raising awareness about violence, safety, and the importance of community preparedness. Their story resonated nationally and even internationally, shedding light on the vulnerabilities faced by ordinary citizens in moments of sudden, extreme violence. Amid these challenges, the family discovered unexpected sources of support. NGOs and local charities offered counseling, financial assistance for medical expenses, and community outreach programs. Volunteers organized memorial events and educational workshops, ensuring that the memory of those lost was honored while also building stronger, safer communities. These efforts, small yet significant, helped the Kumalos regain a sense of agency, proving that even after trauma, meaningful action and solidarity could lead to tangible improvements. Emotionally, the Kumalos' journey remained complex. Survivors' guilt, grief, and post-traumatic stress were constant companions. Yet, through therapy, meditation, and support from friends and neighbors, they learned coping mechanisms to navigate everyday life. They began to reclaim ordinary routines, attending school events, visiting markets, and interacting socially, though with heightened awareness and caution. Each small step forward was a victory, a reaffirmation of resilience and the human capacity to heal even in the aftermath of profound tragedy. As weeks turned into months, the legal proceedings continued, slowly but steadily uncovering the truth. Witness testimony, forensic evidence, and investigative diligence revealed the networks behind the attack, exposing organized crime links and systemic failures that had enabled such violence. For the Kumalos, understanding the broader context did not erase personal loss but provided a measure of clarity and justice. They realized that their story was not isolated but part of a larger narrative about accountability, law enforcement, and the ongoing struggle against violence in vulnerable communities. Throughout this process, one theme became clear: survival. Extended far beyond escaping physical harm. It encompassed emotional recovery, community rebuilding, advocacy, and the pursuit of justice. The Kumalos' fight for life was now intertwined with their fight for the safety and well-being of others. Their resilience became a beacon for neighbors, a call to action for authorities, and an inspiration for anyone facing the daunting task of rebuilding life after trauma. By the end of this period, the Kumalos had not only survived, but had begun to transform their experience into empowerment. Their story of endurance, courage, and determination highlighted the human capacity to respond to tragedy with action, empathy, and leadership. The Bekkersdal tragedy was a chapter of immense pain, but it also became a story of hope, community, solidarity, and the unyielding spirit of a family refusing to be defined solely by the horrors they endured.